Welcome to Best Picture This, where it is always Oscar season. I'm Mike.
And I'm Brian. In this show, we reevaluate every Best Picture nominee from the 21st century and decide whether to keep it or kick it from its Oscar pedestal.
But today we're marching out of our normal routine, Brian, for a special patron-curated bonus episode on the 20th century Best Picture winner, David Lean's 2-hour and 47-minute 1957 war epic, The Bridge on the River Kwai. Let's see the trailer.
You have a problem with 247?
Never. I love them.
Never. Okay, we're going to hear just the first part of it because it's a long trailer. Here we go.
Good.
The adventure they'll all be talking about, as long as the motion picture screen has the power to thrill, to excite, to amaze. The winner of 7 Academy Awards and 27 international awards. From the makers of Lawrence of Arabia, The Bridge on the River Kwai.
I am the commanding officer of this camp. You British prisoners have been chosen to build a bridge across the River Kwai. If you work hard, you will be treated well. But if you do not work hard, you will be punished.
My name is Nicholson.
Give me the book.
Well, by all means. You read English, I take it.
Do you read Japanese?
I'm sorry, no, but if it's a matter of precise translation, I'm sure that can be arranged. You see, the code specifically states that the... Numbers in the ranks!
Ah, the drama of Alec Guinness.
Drama.
Whenever, if the theater still has power to excite, then I think this movie fits that bill, right? So this movie won Best Picture. It also won Best Actor for Alec Guinness. It won Best Director, David Lean. It won Best Writing. It won Best Cinematography. It won Film Editing and Music. And it was also nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Seisu Ayakawa, the Japanese general. So quite the cleanup at the awards. In this show, we will do our Farley Awards for the most awesome moment of the movie. We'll do our golden take. And we'll also ask each other one question designed to let you walk proudly on the rubbery legs of truth after you've been released from the oven of ignorance. We will imagine what might have been, and we'll talk trivia, and I guess we'll do sort of a big reveal, keep it or kick it from the top 5. I didn't see a whole lot of the 1957 nominees, but we'll at least mention that.
Yeah, it gets a little bit tougher when we go kind of far back in history, right?
Indeed.
So
the Farley Awards.
Let's jump right into our Farleys, but there is a lot going on in this movie, Brian. So I think we need to do a little bit of setup here. So
Okay.
we have British POWs led by Alec Guinness, Obi-Wan Kenobi himself. They arrive at a Japanese camp in Burma. The Japanese commander, Colonel Saito, he's tasked with building this bridge, and he tells Guinness that his men will be doing the work. Guinness says that making officers do manual labor is strictly outlawed by the Geneva Convention, and Saito does not care. The two men have a standoff, and Guinness is sent to the oven, basically like a hot box, where he has to sit all day with no food or water. And from there, it basically becomes like a battle of wills, right? You know, will Saito let Guinness die, or will Guinness bend on his principles and, in his eyes anyway, let his people down, let the troops down? So there are a few moments surrounding this conflict that I thought were worthy of picking, but I'm glad that you brought up the rubbery legs of truth, because that's my moment. It really struck me when a few of these Japanese soldiers, they take Alec Guinness out of the oven for a meeting with Saito. And he's weak and he's squinting from the sun. He can barely stand. But since all of his troops are nearby watching, and this is a character who's all about, setting an example and his principles, he pushes them all away. He doesn't want their help. And he forces himself to walk on his own legs. But his walk is unnatural. His legs are stiff. It's almost like he kind of forgot how to walk normally, because he's so weak with no food from all that time. but he's determined, and he does, and he walks to the building. And this moment is good, but part of the reason I picked it is because I read that Guinness said that he subconsciously based his walk here on that of his 11-year-old son, Matthew, who was recovering from polio at the time. And Guinness has said that this scene is, quote, the finest piece of work I'd ever done. And I just thought that that was really interesting how not only the moment is so small, but it's got no dialogue. And for an actor, of Guinness's stature, this guy was in Star Wars, Brian.
Well,
For him,
not quite yet. It's 20 years before Star Wars, but yes.
but for him to say, looking back at my whole career,
Yeah, I
me
know.
walking from this point to that point and not saying a word is what I'm most proud of. I thought that was awesome. And it shows how much of these actors they bring to the role, how much of their real life they bring to the role just within that preparation. And we might not be aware of most of it, but I kind of feel like the reason why certain moments stick with us is because we could see that reality kind of underneath the surface, even if we don't realize it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think he was deserving of a best actor. I mean, again, I didn't see all the 1957, but this is definitely a standout kind of a performance for
Yeah,
Alec
he's
Guinness.
good. He's good.
Yeah, that's kind of like one of the iconic moments. There's quite a few iconic moments in the movie.
So have you seen this movie before?
Yeah, I saw it, but it was kind of a long time ago. And when I rewatched it, I was just like blown away by how great it was again. So thank you again to Joey for picking this movie as a patron.
Yeah. Well, let me just ask you, is that
yeah.
moment, I went into this movie pretty cold. I'd heard of it. I'd never seen it. I didn't really know what it was about. I knew it was a war epic. Is that moment something that is talked about that, that you'll see on kind of highlight reels?
Well, I think the fact I don't know exactly. I think the fact that
Okay.
he's in the oven and he's, that contest of wills, I think that's, to me, that's one thing that makes this movie so great also. I think the blowing up of the bridge at the end is kind of probably the most iconic part of the movie.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. But so my Farley Award is the cinematography. I find that I keep coming back to the cinematography when I do my favorite moment, but the shots of scale are just so great. They're clearly on location out in the jungle.
Yeah.
And I thought I was kind of struck because the cinematography seems to be following all the rules. I mean, all the rules of composition, the rule of thirds and all these kind of things, but it looks so fresh and so perfect all the time. And one particular shot that I really enjoyed, and I took a screenshot of it. I can put it up on our Facebook post when we do it, or I'll send it to you if you want to put it up as the post or whatever. But it's late in the movie, and Saito, the Japanese colonel, I think he's a colonel. Sorry if I got that wrong. It might be a general, but I think he's a colonel. He's on this rock in the background, and he's not mentioned. Guinness is riding. Colonel Nicholson is riding on this little train toward the bridge that he's so proud that they've been building. But we know, the audience knows, that this is pretty twisted, and there's they're building this train that's going to make them lose the war, and he's like, so excited to get it done in the proper British way. So as they're riding towards you on the train, you see Saito on this little mountainside, on this little hill in the background the whole time. And I thought that was like this perfect emblematic kind of a movie, or a shot in the movie, where his presence is looming large in the background. And he's kind of inescapable, even though he doesn't really have much of a role in most of the movie after that first, all those conflicts with Nicholson. He kind of fades into the background a little bit, which is what happens in that shot. So I thought that was really cool. I also loved, by the way, the guy waving the rug, like pulling the rope.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty. It's kind of
good small detail, right?
It was kind of funny to think of how they had to have sort of AC, but also like this, it was a slave who had to do this. I thought that was a good
you're
detail.
right. I love that idea too, because Saito is kind of simultaneously like all powerful because he runs this camp, but also powerless because without the British, this bridge is not getting built. He clearly doesn't have the manpower to do it. And after that sort of oven conflict is resolved, you're right. I mean, he fades to the background, but at the same time, he's like the puppet master. So it's this really cool kind of, how the scale tips from one side to the other all movie long, all 2 hours and 47 minutes.
Is
You
it
never know.
2:47? 2 hours and 47 minutes?
I think
Oh
so. Yeah,
wow, that's pretty long.
it is.
One last quick thing on one thing I really loved, a little small detail like the rug waiver, is the Joey's Garage in Elk City, Ohio, as the calendar. Did you notice the
Oh,
calendar?
yes.
It's
Yes,
like
a
every
very
month,
American calendar.
every month this woman is losing more and more clothes, and this is what the Japanese are using as their calendar for the bridge. It's just hilarious. And the
Yeah,
fact
all
that
the
it has
cultures
that
are mixed up.
it has that very specific Joey's Garage in Elk City, Ohio at the bottom of the calendar is pretty hilarious. So,
Yeah.
golden takes. What's your
Okay.
golden take, Mike?
So initially, I wanted to make my golden take that the Japanese are depicted really badly here. Their leader scoffs at the Geneva Convention. He almost kills a group of unarmed officers for refusing to work, even though it's in their rights to do so. The army seems really disorganized, and it's more than implied that the Japanese bridge engineers are totally clueless. They try to build the bridge in soft sand. Their design is terrible. They're inefficient. And I saw all these things as very kind of American propaganda. But then there are all these moments that humanize the Japanese too. Like when Saito invites Guinness in from the oven just after that scene I was talking about from my best moment. And he basically tries to give in about the manual labor dispute while still, saving face. He says that the officers have to work, but that, Guinness doesn't have to do it. And Guinness turns that down. And he says, well, just the junior officers I meant, not all of them. And then Guinness turns that down. And then he tries to appeal to his humanity. And he says, do you know what will happen if I don't finish the bridge in time? I'll have to kill myself. And we understand how different these cultures are. Like what's at stake for him compared to what's at stake for Guinness. They're worlds apart. And I just think that this adds up to the fact that even 10 years removed from World War II, we had a really complicated relationship with Japan. And regardless of what Lean is trying to say through this movie, because I'm not sure that he's trying to get at that, I think it comes through anyway, because I mean, it's a push and pull, right? All movie long. It's like, are the Japanese terrible or are we supposed to empathize with them? I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, I think the 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 Japanese role, just like you said, is pretty is pretty stark, difference in the cultural their approach. But my golden take is kind of similar because I was thinking about the American how the Americans look. The British look like everybody looks good and bad in different ways, which I think is one of the strengths of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But the Americans are interesting too. I'm going to say that this is a pro-American movie because who's the ultimate, guy who turns things around? It's the American. He's played by William Holden, the big star. At first, the American is like a joke. He's faking sick, like he reveals later on that he was impersonating an officer. He's the one who gets, running around with his girlfriend on the beach. He tries to go back. He tries to avoid going back into battle, even though he's the one who knows the terrain and he should probably be the one to help, win the war. So he looks like this shirker, he's trying to dodge work. He has no honor is what it kind of feels like.
Yeah,
And
he
so
doesn't believe in the army and
No.
in this concept of duty and nobility through duty. He doesn't believe in any of that.
No, he doesn't. But in the end, and I think that is, I kind of took that as like a dig against Americans. This is like showing like the British have this code and the Japanese have this code and the Americans have no code. But in the end, it's the American who then goes and risks his life, and he sees the objective in the end. He runs through the water and he ends up getting shot, but he's like basically the one who delivers the final message to Colonel Nicholson that he needs to blow up that bridge, and it kind of that's the iconic moment where he's like, oh, what have I done, Nicholson, and then he falls on it, but falls on the plunger that blows up the bridge. So I'm gonna say that this, in the end, is a pro-American movie. That he's the hero. I like to think of Americans always being the heroes of every movie.
I mean, we police the world. We've got it all figured out. I think that's just a stone cold fact.
Oh yeah. All right, so let's ask each other our questions.
Okay.
I'll go first. So I'm going to give you a couple of little moments. I'm going to ask you which one you would rather do as my question. Okay. So first one is just as in Love is a Many Splendored Thing, 1955. I have not seen that movie, but the normally hairy-chested William Holden was forced to submit to a full body wax for his many shirtless scenes in this movie, Bridge on the River Kwai. Okay, so that's one. Would you rather have a full body wax? That's one option.
Okay.
The second option is this. You're already deciding you don't want to do that one? Well, here's the second option. In order to film the paratroopers jumping from their plane, director of photography Jack Hildyard lashed himself to the wing of the British military plane carrying the paratroopers and shot the jump with a handheld 16mm camera.
Wow.
So would you rather have the full body wax for shirtless scenes in this movie, or would you rather be lashed to the underside of a wing so that you could film those paratroopers?
Well,
that's my question to you, Mike.
Really cool way to get that shot. Props to that guy. So I feel like I need to pick the plane because that's a life experience that shows that I'm brave, but I'm not jumping out of a plane, Brian. It's not going to happen. There are some people in this world who are built to jump out of planes, and I am definitively not one of them.
And you're more built for the full body wax.
I guess so. I guess so. That would be a painful day for me. But yeah, I'm getting waxed. I'm sorry.
Sounds good. You? I would probably also be waxed.
We are the worst.
I'm a little bit afraid of heights. So I'm sorry if all of you Best Picture This fans thought that you were listening to two very manly guys who liked to do dangerous things. You probably thought that. And this is the big reveal, is that we're actually not. But
yeah, we are avid indoorsmen.
There it is.
So my question to you, Brian.
Yeah.
A movie being labeled a classic, quote, classic, it definitely affects the way that we watch it. And in ways that we might not even be aware of a lot of the times. And River Kwai clearly has that classic label. So it won 7 out of 8 of its Oscar nominations. It was the highest grossing film of 1957. It's preserved in the Library of Congress, and it's ranked number 37 on the AFI's 100 Years, 100 Movies list from 2007. And that was a demotion from when it was ranked number 13 overall on that list in 1997. So I'm curious how you think that the classic label influences your experience with a movie. Are you more likely to kind of approach it with a sort of built-in respect, or with more of that prove it type attitude?
I definitely go into it with the respect. We talked about this in our pilot episode somewhat, because my number one movie, my number one best picture nominee of all time was Casablanca, and that's partly because it has this like mystique and grandeur, just because of how famous it is and how much of a classic it is. And so I do bring that in with me to the movie a lot of times. Like if it's historically, recognized and everything, I do kind of give it a little bit of benefit of the doubt. Like, that shot seemed a little sloppy to me, or I didn't really think that acting performance was really great, but it must be great because it's in Casablanca. Or that acting performance, it's obviously great because it's in Bridge on the River Kwai. So that kind of defines greatness. Sometimes I fall into that trap a little bit. What about you?
I think it definitely is a trap. I try not to go into any movie with the prove it attitude, because I feel like you're setting yourself up for disappointment, and that's just the wrong way to approach any kind of art, to be like, oh yeah, if you're so good, like make me feel something, because then you're already putting up walls. You're not going to feel it.
Mhm.
But when something is a classic, I do want to sort of understand what other people saw in it at the time. And time, I think, plays a big role in this, because times do change. So like I look at this movie and I wrote down a few things that I thought were very impressive, like blowing up the bridge, great practical special effect. It's real and you could tell. Shooting on location in Sri Lanka, that's cool too, because a lot of movies during this period shot on sound stages, and usually very obviously on sound stages with the backgrounds. There are massive set pieces, and the audiences were still very close to World War II, like I mentioned before, only 10 years removed. So the subject matter seems important. It has that weight to it. And I get all that. But if we're talking pure payoff, I guess I'll have to say that it didn't really deliver on like that prove it type of level to me, because I appreciated anyway, the absurdity of thinking that building a bridge is the most important thing in the world. And then how that so quickly shifts to blowing up a bridge is the most important thing in the world. I like that a lot.
Mhm.
But for a 3-hour movie, I was always wondering, like, is that enough? Is that revelation enough to kind of make us question, like, okay, so is this bridge basically a symbol for war? And depending on what side you're on, one thing is the most important thing in the world compared to another one, and the only difference is like where you were born. It's very arbitrary.
Yeah, I didn't really think of it in terms of war as much as just character studies. And to me, the character studies were tremendously effective. The Alec Guinness shift, and it was very believable to me that he kind of was, just like he was sort of blaming Saito as being mad. Like he wouldn't bend. Alec Guinness feels like he's kind of mad in his ignoring the fact that this is making losing the war for the British. But his shift like that, I thought was very effective. I don't know. I think that the only thing that troubled me about the movie was the fact that it is 247. I thought that there were a lot of walking through the jungle kind of
Yes.
scenes, and those did get long. I mean, they're beautiful. A lot of them are, but if you're planting the wire, to set up the plunger. I don't know how long that took, but it felt like it took about 10 minutes to like wrap it around and then, float down the river and get caught, and then float down the river a little more and get caught, and float down the river a little more.
Yeah.
I think
I agree.
you could have shaved a half an hour off by doing some of that, and it probably would have been a tighter movie. But at the same time, they're on location, so they got to show off like all the scenes. And
but do they? That's the question. And I think that you're dead on, because they are on location, because this movie does have an important premise behind it. It's like you want to fit in as much as you can, but I don't think that you have to in order to still get all of that, the whole, the gravity of it, the context.
Yeah.
But more importantly, I got to ask you, is Alec Guinness right, or is he wrong for helping the build this bridge?
I think that he lost sight of the war and instead was doing what was best for his soldiers. And I think that's where he was wrong in it. I mean, they should have been saying, okay, how are we going to win the war, instead of, look at the men, they're happy, they're working so hard, like this is discipline. The discipline became an end in and of itself, and that is not the way to win a war. So I mean, I think that he was definitely wrong. But he was accomplishing other things, and the pride that they felt, like that's what brought him joy and brought his men joy. So it kind of became a distraction, so
Yeah, I think it's lean makes it easy to see both sides and to go back and forth on which side is right. And that's kind of the genius in it. But I also, I don't know. I can't help but see this as, well, isn't this a possible solution to war? You know, my relationship got better with this guy when the lines separating the Japanese from the British got more blurry. When we started working together, that's when my men were happy. That's when I wasn't in the oven anymore, you know, and I got along with this guy. We were having business meetings together and, you know, having lunch during it and having a grand old time. Everybody felt productive and they all felt like they had a purpose when they were working together, as opposed to, all right, well, we're gonna push and pull on this, and the men are the morale is going to be down, and we're going to be treated badly. I think that there's a message there, right? That if we blur those lines between us and them, maybe that's the path forward.
Yeah, and that I think the final line of the movie where the medic says
Madness.
it's all madness. Ebert said that it's kind of impossible to know really what he's referring to there.
Yeah.
Roger Ebert did, and I thought that was kind of true. But my first thought was that he's really talking about the madness of war. That we're things just get so twisted, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
it is, I think, in part an anti-war movie. I don't know that there's many pro-war movies, but
No, I don't think so. Maybe Top Gun. Is there any war in that? I haven't seen Top Gun, to be honest with you.
I have it. I don't think you should bother with it, to be honest. I was very
Yeah.
disappointed. I watched it like a few months ago.
It's one of those 80s movies I feel like I know exactly what I'm getting into.
You do.
I don't need to see it, right? I get it.
This is like before Tom Cruise got really good.
All right. What might have been? Let's go into it.
All right. Tell me yes or no on the following other actors who could have been involved.
Okay.
Sir Alec Guinness. This is a long journey to get him as the role. There are other people chosen. So Spencer Tracy in that role. What do you think about that?
Ooh, Spencer Tracy. You got to give me some context on him.
We'll skip over him. He's an American, and he said that he didn't want to. He needed to be an Englishman.
Okay.
Sir Laurence Olivier as Colonel Nicholson.
I guess so. Why
It
not?
could work. He
Yeah.
turned it down, just so you know, to play the Prince and the Showgirl in 1957, where he got to do love scenes with Marilyn Monroe.
Oh, there you go.
So, you know, he chose Marilyn Monroe over walking through the jungles, you know, and getting leeches.
Alec Guinness won an Oscar, but who's the real winner here, Brian?
Orson Welles was apparently going to co-star and direct.
Wow. It would have been a very different movie.
Very different. He's kind of like so larger than life that
yeah.
it would have been interesting to see that different.
Yeah.
Humphrey Bogart was also in the mind to play the role of Shears, who was eventually played by William Holden, the American.
Yeah, I could see that. He's got that like cynical edge to him.
The American being being the lazy I'm getting out of work to play pretend to be sick. Cary Grant was also a possibility for Shears, but he was just in a big flop in 1950, Crisis, the movie Crisis, which I have not seen. And so the producer, Sam Spiegel, decided to not go with Cary Grant.
Okay.
So William Holden, who was a big star at the time, he got $300,000 for the movie and was guaranteed 10% of the profits.
Wow.
For being in the movie. Okay, so trivia. It's kind of hard to do what might have been because we're not like as familiar with 1957 actors, right? So
I know, it's true. We got to do our homework.
Okay, so trivia. Have you ever had a project that was so you worked so hard on it that you felt like you had to sort of be extra special with the final product so that you didn't ruin it? Like maybe a shoebox diorama, you know, when you're in elementary school or something. Well, that's what I was thinking about when I read this about Sam Spiegel, the director. After the final scene was shot, he shipped the film footage on 5 different airplanes to minimize the risk of loss.
Whoa. Okay.
Like this film footage, I mean, they just shot it out on location. So you can imagine how he was not too, didn't want to have it lost. So this movie was aired on TV in 1966. And the really sad thing about it is that uh, it was shot on this wide image, right? This wide film, 2.55 to 1 is how it was shot. But the TV is 1.33 to 1. So it's almost a square. And they did not have this technology of like, they didn't pan it so that you could see what was important. So people are watching this movie on TV and like the whole sides of the screen were cut off when you're watching this.
Yeah,
So
you can't watch full screen with anything. I mean, even nowadays, I think that if you watch a full screen, that it's distorted. It's not what,
yeah,
the director intended.
absolutely.
I'm very anti full screen.
Widescreen, yes, all about it.
Screen forever.
Um, okay, so oh yeah, this is another one with the music. So it was nominated for Academy Award. Did it win the Academy for music?
It won 7 out of 8, so there's a good chance that
It did win music. So
Okay.
this is the crazy thing that they kind of it was almost like an afterthought. Arnold was hired to compose the score, but he only had 10 days to do it. So he did the whole thing and still won the Academy Award. It's incredible.
I don't know. Is it incredible, or is it that it sometimes is easy to get swept up in the hype of a prestige director making a prestige film that's 3 hours long and about something important?
It would be interesting to look at the best music at some point in different years, because sometimes I feel like the music is mostly kind of background noise. I mean, it's kind of predictable with the strings coming in at certain times and everything. When it's just like when it's like an orchestral kind of a music.
Yep.
I have a hard time understanding like why this one won Best Picture and why this one didn't. When it's something like really strange drums and stuff, then it stands out more, So
And
I don't know.
I guess the argument is that maybe you don't want the music to stand out more. I do think that in certain situations you do want it. I mean, in Birdman and in Punch Drunk Love, the music should be making you feel uncomfortable. But in other movies, you probably don't want the background music to be detracting from the plot. You don't want to be focusing on what's happening in the background. You just want that to be making you feel amplified emotions from what the actors are giving you.
Yep, very true. So this is where we go to keep it or kick it, which is a little.
Let me give you a few before we move on. I got a
ahead,
few pieces of trivia on David Lean, because I did mention that he's a prestige director and he's got the accolades to prove it. So he was voted the 9th greatest film director of all time in the British Film Institute's Sight and Sound Directors Top Directors poll. So this was directors voting on the best directors of all time. That was 2002. Nominated 7 times for the Academy Award for Best Director, which he won twice for Bridge on the River Kwai and Lawrence of Arabia. Lean has 7 films in the British Film Institute's top 100 British films, with 3 of them being in the top 5.
What?
The top 5 movies in the British Film Institute's top 100, 3 of them are directed by David Lean, and he was awarded an AFI Lifetime Achievement Award in 1990. So the definition of a prestige director.
Yeah, I'd say so.
He's also made 2 Charles Dickens adaptations and several epics, including Lawrence of Arabia and Dr. Zhivago. So yeah, I wonder if I was alive at this time, if a new David Lean movie came out, if I'd be like, oh, this is an event, like this is what I'm waiting for, or if it'd be one of those things where I kind of felt like, all right, let's buckle in. I should see this. I'll enjoy it, but maybe I'm not excited about it.
Yeah, is this going to be another 247 type of a movie?
I love how this podcast is slowly devolving into just a rally cry against 3-hour movies.
If a movie can do what it's supposed to do in 145, now we're talking, right?
Yeah, knock it out.
One other movie that I really loved that came out that year was 12 Angry Men. It was also nominated for Best Picture. I'd be curious to rewatch 12 Angry Men in this context with Bridge on the River Kwai, because I don't know, if you just asked me before rewatching Bridge on the River Kwai which movie I liked the most, 12 Angry Men or Bridge on the River Kwai, I probably would have said 12 Angry Men, but I really do like this Bridge on the River Kwai. When you said it fell from 13 down to 37 in the AFI 100, I think that this is legitimately 13 does not sound does not sound crazy to me.
I recently watched 12 Angry Men a few
Okay.
months back, and I think I'd probably still say I prefer that one. But I'm one to always sort of prefer the dialogue heavy human.
Yeah.
What's the word? Like a very focused human drama rather than the very sort of big sprawling epic.
Yeah.
But there's no denying. I mean, this one in terms of achievement, you know, they're blowing up a bridge. The set pieces are incredible. Like that's where the discussion becomes very difficult, right? For what makes a best picture, because do we give it to the quote achievement, you know, the one that really like it did something that other movies didn't do, or do you do it with the movie? Do you give it to the movie that just made you feel more, that you connected more with, that told you something more about you know, everyday life experience and the human condition? I don't know.
I really, I think that's a tension that we keep coming across in this podcast. I do find that the visuals really contribute to the feel of the movie to me. I mean, I know they do to you too, but I find that I don't know. I get swept up in the really dramatic shots of nature or of, you know, on the high seas, that sort of thing. So thank you again to Joey for choosing this as a patron movie. I was very glad to revisit it.
We want to hear from you. Send in your thoughts on prestige directors, on 3-hour movies on The Bridge on the River Kwai, and we will read your answers on the show. You can find us at bestpicturethis.com on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or by telling your smart speaker to play Best Picture This. We're also on Facebook and Twitter at Best Picture This. And for 15 years of golden takes, head over to Letterboxd, where you'll find me, Mike Cavalieri.
So we have now done The Fly, chosen by Chris as a patron movie. We have done Garden State, chosen by Matt. Bridge on the River Kwai. We're going to do Drowning Mona, chosen by Spencer. And the next one, can you remind me who chose?
Yes, Maddie from Orlando has chosen Pleasantville for our next Patron's Choice episode. So we'll probably be dropping that in a few weeks.
I feel like we keep, this is kind of like becoming, the patron movies are sort of like revisiting the cult classics, which is very exciting to me.
Makes sense, right? I mean, these are the movies that aren't getting nominated for Best Picture, but that people still love, and they want to find a place for them, you know, in the canon that you and I are building of movies worth keeping in cinema history. Everything else can go, and we are deciding what's getting kept instead of kicked.
I mean, the Oscars, yes, they can canonize, but it's not quite as exciting as being canonized by Best Picture This, I think.
Yeah, especially when we're kicking half of the Oscars picks and saying, no, you got it wrong.
at least half.
Yeah.
All right. So remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And until next time, remember, there's no shame in faking sick so that you can listen to more episodes of Best Picture This.
Chicken!